Well, welcome to 2022. This is our first virtual event of the year with Small Giants. My name is Hamza. If I haven't met you already, I'm with the Small Giants community. And I also have my colleague Annie, who's somewhere in the top Brady Bunch style vlog there. And we're really excited to also have Sonia Funk with us, who I'll introduce shortly. So just a couple of housekeeping notes. Like I said, this is going to be an interactive conversation, and we are a casual bunch and we love to see everyone. So if you're able to turn on your camera, please do so now. We do also ask you to stay on mute so we can give our full attention to Sonia. Many of you have submitted questions, and Sonia has seen those ahead of time, so she'll be able to insert a lot of these responses within her presentation, but there'll also be opportunities to address your questions at the end. You can also submit questions throughout the presentation in the chat, and we'll do our best to sort of pay attention to that. We always start on time and end on time, but Sonia has been really generous and she's going to stick around a little bit later today after we end on time. So if you want to stick around and have more questions, she'll be more than happy to stay for a little bit and address those. We will record today. It is being recorded. We'll take lots of notes. And then if there are resources mentioned, we will share all of that with you tomorrow. It will come in an email. Did I address everything, Sonia? I think I got everything. So with that, I'm really excited to introduce Sonia Funk. She is a meditation specialist, a corporate wellness strategist. She is a nutritional therapist, and she's traveled the world both as a student and a teacher, and she's gathered a lot of perspective on the topic of wellness. And I think you are in for a really wonderful treat today. So with that, Sonia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Hamza. Hello, everybody. I am very happy to be here, and I am very happy that you are here. I will just reiterate what Hamza said. If you are into having your video on, it helps me be able to see where you're getting it and where you're confused and how you're responding to what I'm talking about, which just really helps me make this even better for you today. So if you're cool with it, please turn your cameras on. And if you are not, of course, that is okay. So I have had quite the journey gathering the perspectives that I'm going to share with you today. Another time I could perhaps tell you the story of the life that I have lived that brought me here. They say it is some kind of conglomeration of Eat, Pray, Love, and Forrest Gump. And that really is the kind of life that I have lived. And I was very fortunate to be able to live in a lot of places and learn a lot of things from a lot of really great, wonderful people. What we're talking about today, where this work has come from, I've had a vision for this for decades. I have been working on it for 15 years. And I got really fortunate to, after all my world travels, land back in the small town where I was born. Technically, it's called a city now, but I still call it a small town. And so some of the corporations and the companies here let me basically practice, in a sense, what I'm going to talk to you about today on them. And it was a really great way for me to grow into this work. So I want to tell you the story about this first, because one of the key foundational aspects of the work that I do, even though I talk about biology and the nervous system and stress and food, is I use story. Because especially right now, but it was like this even before the last 2 years happened, we need story to communicate things because stories don't trigger. Stories don't have the words and the things that can make us defensive or, terms and things that everyone is sensitive to, because stories are timeless. And so that is what I always like to start with. So here's where what we're going to talk about today kind of landed, even though I've been doing this for a very, very long time. A few years ago, I asked for a meeting of a CEO of a company here that I had done quite a bit of work for. And I said I wanted to run something by him. And I asked for half an hour of his time. And here is what I walked into his office and said. And you should know, I had done some stuff with specific departments, and also many of his employees had become my one-on-one clients. So it was a perfect scenario for this. So I said to him, look, I see the timelines of the people in your company that are costing you the most money. I know what it's like at home for them. I know how difficult life and family can be. I know where the medication costs are coming from. I know the history behind all of these things. I also know that we are living in a country, because I'm up in Canada, although there are more similarities than you would suspect, possibly. I said, I know that we have an overburdened healthcare system. And I know that that system has no choice at this point, but to push the compounding cause of the root cause down the road. We slap an intervention or a medication on it because that is what we have to do right now. And then the root cause does not get addressed and it compounds. This is no one particular person's fault. This is just the world that we're living in. And I said, so this is a bit of a mess. And I said, and unfortunately, here's what I know. You, the business owner, are the only person left in this country to pay for this. And he looked at me and he said, oh, Sonia, you are worse than taxes. But I know you're right. And that's why story and talking about things this way is very important. There were, of course, questions from you about buy-in. When you talk about the human story and you come at the numbers that way, it bypasses the fear. And it is this person of this big company saying, oh, you are worse than taxes, recognizing that I am just as inevitable as Thanos, really. So, and it's something that I've really noticed now in the last 2 years, especially the work I've done in the last few months. People don't want the good news anymore because they're like, whatever, there's so much more. They're like, give me the bad news. Where is ground zero and where do we go from here? And so that is the real talk that I like to bring to the work that I do. It's like, okay, this is a mess. Now, how do we clean it up? And I just find that that is a better way to approach things right now. So what ended up happening there was he also put his hands down on his chair and he said, we need more time, after he told me I was worse than taxes. And then we planned a half day. He brought in another CEO from an even bigger company and we kind of worked all of this out. So what I want to really offer you today are new perspectives. And I want to leave you with better questions than we have collectively been answering or that we have been asking. Because what I know for sure is that if the answers that we're implementing aren't working and aren't working well enough, then the solution is probably quite simple. It just means we need better questions. Because the more willing you are to ask a more ground zero, how bad is it question, the easier and more obvious the answer becomes. That is just how this works. So if you leave here with a few new questions and a few new insights, then I've done my job for you today. So the other thing I want to do also is recognize who is here today. I know that you are tired. I know that you are actually beyond tired. You were tired before 2020. Most people have reached a level where the daily question is, I don't know how much more of this I can take. And I want you to know that there's nothing wrong with you. That is a normal response to some very abnormal things that have happened. The most recent stats in Canada that just came out, I think it was Sun Life that did it, 1/3 of Canadians are reporting being burnt out. That means that there's actually more because there are people who underreport. I see them in my office all the time, and people that are so exhausted that they don't even know how exhausted they are. And so that's kind of the place where we need to start. So, and here's the next thing that I know about everyone that is here. In some of my leadership coaching that I do, I use archetypes that are in the stories that I use. You're all familiar probably with Anna and Elsa from Frozen. Anna is the character in the archetype because the two of them to me are actually really two archetypes of a leader in the same leader. We're all very familiar with Anna. She wants to do the next right thing. You would not be here if you were not friends with your Anna archetype, so to speak. You want to do the next right thing. What we have not really been told is that one of the reasons that this is so difficult to deal with is that we have not harnessed the power of our Elsa. We have not harnessed the magic of being willing to find the truth about the past to understand how bad it actually is and to send that answer to the part of our psyche that is Anna so that we know exactly what the next right thing is. And that bravery and that willingness of Elsa, who even culturally we're a little bit afraid of, right, in this cartoon because she's a little bit magical, that power that is there to be willing to look at the real picture and the real things going on is also where the genius and the strategy comes from to prevent the catastrophic events of what happens when Anna does do the next right thing, because she breaks it down, right? So I know you weren't expecting to hear about cartoons, but I also know that you will never watch that movie the same way again. And don't get me started on Moana, because we'll be here all day. So that is one of the things that I always integrate into my work, because that helps us step outside of ourselves and look at all the stuff going on and be able to see things a little bit more clearly. So I want to give you some information and some truth about the past that's going to help you find some better questions to help you understand what the next right thing is. So what I usually start with in a lot of my work, and it may seem counterintuitive because corporate wellness and strategy and business might not seem like we should start with a topic like food, but that is where we are going to start with. And the reason is because I can tell you a story about the truth about the past about food that is going to change the way that you look at it. And then what you will see is that story of food and the journey that that has been on is a story that has parts and pieces and cause and effect that plays out everywhere else. And it's a more neutral place to look at this story from. And what you will find, and if some of you want to take some notes, because some of you will definitely want to know the 3 areas of health that I said are non-negotiable for a corporate wellness strategy. One of them is food. And I want to be very clear that I am saying food, not nutrition. And you're going to understand that soon. The second thing that you absolutely are going to need to bring in is knowledge about the nervous system. By the time we're done here today, the word nervous system will not scare you, I promise. And the other aspect of our health, with all the current research coming out that people need as a tool in their tool belt to help themselves, especially where mental health and digestive health is concerned, is information about our microbiome. So I'm going to walk you through the story of food, and then we're going to briefly cover the nervous system and the microbiome so that you can see the cause and effect and how it's all connected. Normally, these things would be half-day workshops each at least, but I'm going to give you the best parts of it so that you can see how to connect the dots. And that's going to help you understand why these things are so crucial for a strategy. So if you would, for a minute, I would suggest that you close your eyes while I walk you through the story of something, because it's going to help you visualize things and you will probably remember it better as far as food goes, because I'm going to turn a lot of food and nutrition paradigms upside down for you. So if you want to close your eyes, if you want to imagine the story of what has happened to, let's say, a sunflower seed. We used to take that sunflower seed in a village a long time ago and put a bunch of them in a little press that had this big rock that would roll around and press the seeds, and the oil and some of the stuff in it would come out. It would funnel down. It would drip down into a little glass bottle, probably, maybe clay. And we would take that little bit home, probably 3 to 4 ounces, and we would use it for a couple days. Within 3 or 4 days, it would have gone rancid and it would have to be thrown out. What that oil had in it, which we have now in our own way started to come back to that because there are unrefined raw oils available to us. You've all heard of extra virgin olive oil, coconut oil, etc. What had to happen to that to suit the human needs of the Industrial Revolution, and I'm cutting this story so short because it's usually a lot longer, is essentially what we had to do is that cloudy bottle that was full of vitamin E and lecithin and enzymes that helped our body break down the fat and some fiber and all kinds of good things in it. What we had to do is, when we started flocking to cities, we needed food on shelves and we needed it to last a long time. In order for that food that had all the batteries that it was supposed to come with to work in our body, is usually the best analogy for this, we had to take all of those batteries out. We had to kill that oil so that it would not die on the shelf. And if you can imagine, without going into all the stuff that's so hard for me not to go into because food is one of my big things, if you can imagine your body and being the same as a 5-year-old on Christmas morning and you got a toy. I got a ghetto blaster when I was probably 8. Now you all know how old I am. And there were no batteries. And it was Christmas morning and all the stores were closed. So you have a choice. You can either go to the remote control or anywhere else and take those batteries out and make this toy work so that the kid doesn't freak out on Christmas morning. or you cannot do it and have the freak out. So you are going to go and find the batteries, make the toy work. When you go back to that remote control or the thing that you took it out of to use it, it's not going to work. In the simplest way that I can communicate this, this is what we have done to our food supply to meet the demands of the evolution of our society, the Industrial Revolution, tech, internet, all those kinds of things. And so our body is like that 5-year-old who needs this battery. When our digestive system gets this refined food, whether it is Kraft Dinner or Triscuits or Crisco oil, white flour, whatever it is, all the foods that are not the way that they were 100 years ago, it has to go to other areas of our body and extract enzymes and nutrients to neutralize and replace the missing batteries so that we can move this thing that is foreign to us and that does not help us out of our body. And it steals that ammunition from places like our pancreas, our liver, and our immune system. So that is the tie-in with the food of the history there. And if you can imagine, if your eyes are still closed, or if you open them, close them again, I'm going to, if we were in person, you would all have to do a tasting with me. This is one of the meanest things that I do to people when I do live workshops. We go through orange juice so that you never forget what is food and what is not food. So I want you to imagine the last time you had fresh orange juice, whether you went down to Florida or Mexico, or you squeezed it in your kitchen or at a restaurant. What did that taste like? The tanginess on your tongue, the feeling of interaction and life going down your throat. It kind of almost feels alive, right? Your salivary glands right now are activating, because this is the power our mind has over our body. You can think about something and you can activate your salivary glands and your brain, and your digestive system is actually now getting ready to digest that orange juice. That's how powerful the mind is over the body. Now I want you to pour a glass of Tropicana, and I want you to compare that to what you just tasted. It's a little flatter, right? Kind of more sugary, kind of more tastes like maybe a little bit of orange flavor in there, so to speak. Not as great. Your body for sure has just dulled down its reaction, right? Can you sense that? Some of you can probably sense it. If you can't, that's totally fine. We're all different that way. Now I want you to have a glass of Tang. If you can remember what that was like. Is anyone's body going, woo, Tang, this is amazing. I don't want any more of that orange juice. No. Okay. Now have a sip of orange Kool-Aid, please. It's the worst. And so now what I want you to do is try to get rid of that flavor in your mouth. Have one more sip of that nice orange juice, just so that, you know, you don't have that aftertaste in your mouth, and feel the difference. This right here, when I say you need to talk about food and not nutrition, is we have to get people reacquainted with what food is. And we have to get them reacquainted with what their body is saying about the food that they're eating, because that changes everything. If you're walking into the grocery store, you're confused right now if you're trying to eat healthy. The hashtag I own on Instagram is there's no such thing as healthy food. Something is either food or it is not food. And if you get rid of all of the confusing nutrition, and I know we've all done lunch and learns on this, and we've all read things and all that kind of stuff, some of that matters when someone is sick. I am a nutritional therapist, so yes, but that has to be pushed out of the way. And we have to get people back to understanding that something is either food and it supports your well-being and your mental health, which is all the same in my world, but it's important to differentiate that for the way a lot of people have been trained to perceive these things. It either helps you and feeds you and gives your body what it needs to work well, or it takes more from your body than it gives, and it causes problems and it interrupts processes. Because if I can take you back to that story about the sunflower seed, the unrefined natural fats that we used to eat and the refined ones that we're mostly eating now, something on a biological level, if I had a big whiteboard here or something, I would probably draw this for you, is that molecule has a shape like this in nature, in an unsaturated fat. You've all heard of that. And that means that at this joint, in all of the little molecules that are around here, something has one hydrogen atom missing, and that makes it reactive and it has a charge to it. In order to kill it so it didn't die on the grocery shelves, we had to force an atom onto there and straighten it up like this. That means the body has to take its energy and its resources and its enzymes and break this apart again so that it can use this to build cell walls and ammunition in your immune system. If you do that over and over again for over 100 years now, you're going to exhaust body systems. You're going to have all the health conditions that we have now. And then, of course, where it really went wrong in the 80s, when someone discovered cholesterol under a microscope and decided that fats were responsible for high cholesterol and heart disease. And then just a few years later, someone was like, oh, no, actually, that's completely wrong. It's sugar. But it was too late because the food marketing companies had decided that's how it was and built an entire low-fat industry around it. And it is sugar. So that's one of the things when it comes to food. We have to be honest. We have to find the truth about the past. Blame doesn't help anything. And one of the ways that I really tend to quell blame, because people, can be triggering, because when you start to see the cause and effect and you understand that your loved ones and you have suffered because of these things, that's difficult. And that's where Elsa has to be able to hold the truth about the past and to be able to say, okay, look, this is terrible. It sucks. It is not fair. Blaming keeps you stuck in the past and you will never get out of it. And we'll just be there pointing fingers at all the things that all the nutrition studies have blamed everything else for. And it's not going to get us anywhere. What does help is to understand that in the 30s and 40s, there were scientists saying, hey, this is what's going to happen if we keep doing this to our food. Their prophecies have come true. The cholesterol, diabetes, poor mental health, all those things have happened. And the question is, so why? Why didn't we listen to them? Why didn't we take this warning? Well, because we're human and we've got egos and all those kinds of things, and we were learning cool things. But that isn't really it. What happened in the 40s? What global event changed the world forever? War, right? War, yeah. When that war was done, who went to work for the first time? Moms. What industry had the most jobs? Food processing. Who needed really cheap, quick food to feed their family because they were working for the first time in a lot of ways? Moms. And then the rest is history. And that is a big reason for why we are here. And that's why I like to tell those stories, because that takes some of the charge off of it. It's like, that's terrible, but that's what happened. We have new information now, which is why these topics are so important for wellness. And so we need to look at that and say, that is terrible. That whole fat, sugar, cholesterol thing in the 80s was totally detrimental to us. This is what happened. Now, what do we do? So that is where the food stuff comes in. I'm going to very quickly, I'm just going to share my screen here, because what we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through some stuff on mental health, but we're going to do it in a little bit of tying things in with some food stuff here too. Hold on, I've lost my share screen button here. Okay, I've got a little recipe for you here so that we can start to understand the tie-in without me having to go into all the details that we don't have time for today. So I have a recipe for you. This is a recipe for traditional North American anxiety and afternoon exhaustion. You ready for this? Do not eat food within 30 minutes of waking up. Have 2 cups of coffee instead. Do not have water, because this will dilute the anxiety punch in the gut later. Have a sugary muffin or pastry from Starbucks or at work. If you want to make it last longer, add 1 more cup of coffee and do not eat anything else. Anxiety between 11 and noon. Eat a massive lunch to compensate for the morning. Have some post-lunch exhaustion and need the sugar and caffeine to help you get through the afternoon. Depending on the audience I'm talking to, I might expand this to a little more coffee in the afternoon, anxiety out of control by the time you get home, and now you've picked up your kids and you need a glass of wine just to survive making dinner and putting them to bed. And I say this because this is no one person's fault. This is almost everybody, and this is also a big problem, okay? So when it comes to the next part of these 3 things that we need to understand when we start to look at the timeline is we need to understand the nervous system. I'm going to be very brief on this part because I just want you to get some of the basics. And like Hamza said, I'm going to actually put together a takeaway sheet for you so that you can see more of the details on this if you want to. Okay. So my big mental health question, which is nervous system related, is it an illness or is it an injury? And I don't ask this because they're mutually exclusive. I don't ask this because it's some hard line between the two, because humanity is a gray area. I ask this because looking at the injury side of things empowers people and gives them some hope. So the definition of an injury is hurt, damage, or loss sustained. Okay, so welcome to the last 2 years of our lives. The definition of an illness is an unhealthy condition of the body or mind. What I have found in my work is that our healthcare system has evolved in a way where we have pathologized injury, which then takes away the opportunity to heal the injuries before they turn into an illness. Does that make sense to everyone? It is a very key paradigm shift that you literally even need in your company and for your people to empower them to help themselves. Okay. So here's something else that I want to talk about, and then I'm going to explain the nervous system to you. This is a very powerful thing happening in your people every day. The person in the grip of all distress says things that are not pertinent, does things that do not work, fails to cope with the situation at hand, and endures terrible feelings that have nothing to do with the present. And because we are leaders here, I can say to you what I would say in the boardroom is that most likely the majority of the anxiety and depression meds that you are paying for right now are medicating something in the past that has not been resolved. You are paying for what happened to them 20 years ago. That is fundamental for leadership teams to understand. And that is one of the reasons that this person told me I was worse than Texas. So this is the perfect biological storm as well, because remember how I just told you how our food, lifestyle, and drink choices create exhaustion and anxiety? Old things stuck in our nervous system and stuck in our primitive brain, which is what I'm going to explain to you next. When something in the present moment reminds our primitive nervous system and brain of something that happened in the past that we have not dealt with, that was very traumatic or fearful, this same cascade of hormones and transmitters are triggered in our body. We relive it in our physiology like it was happening again, even though the present moment doesn't even compare. That is very damaging. That is very expensive. And that leads to a lot of ill health. So this is what happens. Blood pressure goes up when we're triggered in a stress response. Sugar is released into the bloodstream so we can run or fight. Blood flow is directed to the back of the brain where our survival brain is. And up here where we think, it is reduced. So rational thought, rational brain, problem-solving brain, conflict-solving brain, offline, gone. The digestive system slows down and the immune system response is dampened. And how this works is in an initial stress response. So now we're going to get a little bit into the nervous system here. So I'm just going to stop this. So here's how this works and why I tell companies this is what you are paying for. In an initial stress response, what happens is most of the initial first stage of the stress response happens in our brain. All of the communication. You can see, your brain sees the car coming at you that you haven't visually processed yet before you know that it's coming. That's why you can jump out of the way of something before you consciously register that it's there. That is how fast and how evolved our primitive brain is to manage threats. What should happen is you're back on the sidewalk, you're safe. The resistance is supposed to come to calm the heart rate down, to return the blood flow to the digestive system and the immune system and turn the rational brain back on. When this stress trigger continues, long-term, like, I don't know, pandemic, that's just, maybe a pandemic is a chronic stress response for 2 years. What happens is we move into the second stage of the stress response. That happens more in the body. And I always hesitate separating the head from the body because it is all the same thing, but it does help for understanding these things right now. So then what happens is adrenaline is kind of more in that first stage. Then we move into cortisol, and the body secretes cortisol, which still has a dampening effect on the immune system. It still does cut us off from our rational brain, slows our digestion down. And the reason is because this is this outdated part of us, of the nervous system and the primitive brain, that we need to understand, is that our nervous system was designed for a world that does not exist anymore. Ethan Nichtern said that. It is a really great quote. That is one of the most empowering things that you can teach anybody, because that says this is not your fault. You can do something about it. And as you can probably imagine, if you're being chased a long time ago, where this developed by a lion, or someone was invading your village once or twice a year, your digestion of the meal that you just ate and your immune system are not priority. Why does it matter if your body can fight off a virus or not if that lion's going to kill you in 2 seconds? It's irrelevant. So the priorities that our nervous system and our primitive brain have, that are very much in charge of the things that we do and say when we are stressed, have outdated programming. And that is where so much of the problems that you're seeing come from. I'm telling you, that is where all of the social media awfulness comes from. People were scared. They disconnected from their rational brain. They moved into survival mode. Their point had to be right. It had to be this. Someone had to be the enemy. That is where a lot of this has come from. And that is why this got even more stressful. We also have leadership, it would seem, in the Western world that is not trauma informed and doesn't understand this. And so they use very poor language, constantly triggering people's stress response, doing nothing to help us with our nervous system. And here's where this nervous system stuff really comes in. The nervous system has 2 sides to it. It's the easiest way to explain this to anyone is think of it as 2 sides. You have the sympathetic nervous system, which is where we go when we are stressed. And that is the part that is in charge of all of the things that I just described. We have the parasympathetic side, which is the rest and digest side, where the brain comes back online, where our immune system kicks back in. And depending on our stressors, depends where on this continuum we are. You're never just one or the other. It isn't really separate. It's just this continuum that the nervous system exists on. And when you start to understand that these are the things that are happening in your stress response, these are the things that are happening when you're stressed, and you start to understand, if I don't move out of this stress response, my immune system and my digestive system is going to be damaged, then you aren't going to be as motivated to understand how to do something about that. The problem with the term mental health at this point, obviously there is this stigma with it, and people are trying to get rid of the stigma. And I'm always playing devil's advocate, because I look at something, and if I see it's not working, then I'm like, I'm not here for that. And I flip it upside down. And I'm like, what if we ask this question? And so language is very powerful. The term mental health triggers a lot of people. And so if you start to look at it with a different language, because changing the language around food, the nervous system, and mental health, and all of these things are going to be the fastest way to create buy-in in your company, because you bypass the triggers with the story instead of this term that a lot of people don't like right now. When you start to talk about, I am really triggered in my, you're not really going to say this, but in my sympathetic nervous system, my HPA axis, which we didn't go into today, but it's this connection in the body where the stress response goes around in like a triangle, is firing. And so I am so exhausted, and I feel like I'm developing IBS because I'm stressed all the time because there's so much cortisol. When you start to explain anxiety and depression in those kinds of ways, and there's a new language that gets adopted around it, that is completely different. People are not as defensive. People start to understand that it is not their fault, and maybe they can do something about it. Is there any, in the chat, is there any specific question on that? Because I am skipping so many details, trying to give you the high level stuff so you can connect the dots. Are we doing okay? Nod heads, yeah, okay, good. That was 2 3-hour workshops in how many minutes? 30 minutes. Okay, so now I want to briefly talk to you about the microbiome, and then we're going to do something based on the questions that I saw and who I could see was coming here today, I wanted to also give you a gift and an experience of what it's like to move into the parasympathetic nervous system intentionally. So we're going to do that after this. How many of you have heard about the microbiome before? Not very, just a few. Okay, so I have a lot of important information for you that I'm going to say in a very short period of time. Essentially, you've probably heard of probiotics and things like that. Our gut flora is another word for it. Our microbiome that is in our digestive system everywhere. I mean, we have microbiome everywhere. I think it's 70 or 90 trillion cells of bacteria. We are actually more bacteria than we are human. What they know now, in short, and you can Google microbiome, there's some great universities out there doing research if you want to know more. But what we basically know now is that the connection between the brain and the gut, which is the gut-brain connection that you may have heard of, the connections run along the vagus nerve. We used to believe, back when we also thought fats were responsible for high cholesterol and obesity, that most of the pathways traveled down and our brain told our gut and the immune system that's down here what to do. What we now know that it's actually this flora, these critters that are alive and communicate, that they produce a lot of our neurotransmitters. 90% of your serotonin, which is a good mood hormone, is produced in your gut. Most of the messages actually go up. We used to think it was one way, going this way. So many of the messages go up from the gut and the immune system that is here up to our brain to tell us how to feel. That is a complete flip on things when you talk about mental health as well. If your digestive health severely impacts your mental health, then what you're actually doing is you're looking at where is the injury to my microbiome and my digestion. And then when you know that food is information to tell your microbiome how to behave, then where is the injury to my food that my microbiome doesn't have the right information to tell me how I actually feel. And so that is some of the collective injuries that have happened. And those, of course, have also now, sorry, my dog just started snoring and it just made me giggle because he's here. But that is where this question of when it comes to mental health is so important. Yes, these things can evolve into an illness, but how many people have been caught in a pathology of an injury and a symptom and felt like they had to stay there and they were stuck there and they couldn't do anything while they just waited to get worse until it really did develop into an illness. That is where intervention in a strategic wellness program can make a long-term difference in your company. And I know I could tell you 10 different ways to do that, but of course we don't have time for that much today. But does that make sense? Can you see where it's all these injuries from the last 100 years, finding the truth about the past and going, okay, but here's what we know now. Here's the new research on trauma and the nervous system and the stress response and the brain and neurobiology and psychoneuroimmunology and neuroscience and all of these things. Here's all the things that we know now. I was telling the girls that I just had a chat actually with Zach Mercurio yesterday where the conversation was, we all have a piece of the pie that is the answer to all of these things. All the research is there. Everything that we're dealing with right now has an answer and we've figured it out already. And that's why strategy is so important, to getting this information to people is so important. So what I want to do is, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to take you through this timeline very quickly first, and then we're actually going to end with the little breathwork meditation that I want to do for you, because I want to demonstrate for you in real time how easy it is to start to balance and heal some of these injuries. And I know that you are carrying a lot, so I want you to feel better when we are done here as well. So that is another reason why I was so short on some of these things, because I got materials for you to learn more about this stuff on. So I'm just going to go back to screen share here. And I want to show you a few more things here. Okay. So this for me is where it all started. I was 12 years old when I heard my mom got a set of cassette tapes from a company called Sounds True, and it was Carolyn Miss. And she was talking about, it was 8 cassette tapes. It makes me feel so old. And the title of it was why people don't heal. And one of the questions she asked was, does our biography become our biology? And that was 12. That was very, very many decades ago. I spent my whole life proving that that is what the problem is. And so I'm going to show you a timeline, and I'm going to explain this to you. This is me being worse than taxes, but I want you to understand this angle of stuff here. This is a typical timeline of a 42-year-old woman that would come to my office. She's on 4 to 5 medications. She is at her wit's end. She's unhappy in her relationship, and she's thinking of going on stress leave. I was fortunate enough in the situation I was telling you about with the company here before to have had that CEO's best employee, in his words, in my office, and she allowed me to use her timeline to demonstrate why the company needed to do something about this. It was a very unique position that I was in. This is not exactly hers, but this is a very common timeline. So you often will have, in the person that presents the way I just described, you will have had lots of ear infections or bladder infections when they were a kid, so lots of antibiotics. That is where a microbiome injury enters the picture. Or they were a C-section baby. This is another place where the microbiome is key, because a microbiome is passed down from the mother to the baby in natural childbirth. If you were a C-section and your mother did not breastfeed you, which is another way to get the microbiome into the gut, then you end up with your parent's skin microbiome, and you are prone to autoimmune diseases when you are older. Also expensive, why the microbiome education is very important. Then you have some kind of event. It can be a big trauma or a little trauma. It actually doesn't matter. What matters is whether or not it gets stuck in your primitive brain and your nervous system. That is what matters. If you don't have the proper support and attachment in a short period of time after a trauma happens to process it into your rational brain, it stays stuck back there. So whether it is mommy didn't come out of her room for 4 days, my stepdad started beating me down at the bottom, or you just got completely ignored because something else was going on in the family or someone died. That's when the tummy aches start, because there is a fear that the needs won't be met or that there is danger. Then it becomes hard to concentrate at school. This starts to impact confidence and create uncertainty and insecurity immediately. Because you have been set up with a damaged microbiome, the Western diet that lacks all the batteries, puberty is not going to go well. Headaches, skin issues. Because we have pathologized symptoms, we say, stupid body of a 13-year-old girl, here's a pill, you're doing it wrong. We don't recognize that the body's just saying something is wrong. Can you please help me with this? And that there's a lot of research out there showing that that actually really impacts the psychological development of that person as well, depending on other factors. Nothing's ever black and white. So you're insecure, you're uncertain, you may attract a bully into your life, because if you're getting bullied at home, you tend to get bullied at school. Not always, but that tends to happen. Eventually, you make it through high school, you leave home, it's university, it's real life stress. This is where your nervous system, from a neuroscience point of view, is resonating at a frequency, so to speak, where you're going to attract someone that is probably as dysfunctional as you, and the two of you will probably have a dysfunctional relationship, which will cause more damage, more injuries. Anxiety will peak around this time. Once the adrenals are tired of the stress response and they can't handle anxiety anymore, the brain shuts it down, and then you can feel really tired, chronic fatigue, or get depressed. If you get married, you go into career, you're working full time, you try to have kids. At this point, this woman of the outcome that I was talking about never fully recovers from childbirth. The weight stays on, the hormones don't necessarily come back. Whether they get, and then so you have tension, fatigue, there's loss of control, there's heartache, unhappiness, maybe it's divorce, maybe it's staying and being unhappy. This is the point where the body systems start to break down. Then you have cholesterol, blood sugar issues. Maybe you have a hysterectomy, because we've pathologized all of these symptoms. We're not looking at this whole story of the injuries. We're just saying there's something wrong, and we're going to intervene and fix it. Oh, sorry. There we go. So this is when I talk about injuries, you have the immune system and the microbiome there that start getting impacted because when you're stressed all the time as a child, your immune system is constantly being shut down. That's why you end up being sick a lot too. Your HPA axis, which is your stress response, and you start holding your breath because that's the first thing we do when fear comes. And we all work at our desks like this now too for the last 2 years. It's so fun. The liver comes into play here. It only has over 500 functions to help the body work properly. So whatever, let's not try to help it. Let's just slap a pill on the hormones. Endocrine damage starts to show up here. Hormones and sex drive go. Because when you're in a stress response, your hunger goes, your sex drive goes, everything shuts down. If you're stressed all the time, and then relationships, even relationships that seem good, can shut down around this time as well. Then you end up IBS, anxiety, Crohn's, colitis. These are the things that happen. Cancer, heart disease, metabolic syndrome is next. Each generation is going through this timeline faster and faster. I've been doing this for a while, for 2 decades now almost, and every 10 years, the timelines get shorter, compressed into a younger and younger age. People are working longer than they used to. And so now a lot of the things that companies didn't have to pay for 30 years ago, you're now paying for metabolic syndrome. Also, when the brain doesn't have what it needs, when we don't have the building blocks for neurotransmitters and hormones in our food, when we don't have the right information going to our microbiome and faulty messages get sent to the brain, when we are stuck in old things and constantly re-triggered, mental health was always going to be the last thing to go. It is at the end of this train, and this is why the timeline and understanding the cause and effect is so incredibly important. Okay, so that's a lot, and I always give leaders a little bit more than you can probably handle. I'm going to help you deal with that a little bit right now. But what I want you to understand, where I know some of you were asking about how to measure this for metrics and stuff like that. Realistically, this is like a really unique story-based actuarial analysis of everything going on. But what I do is I take average ages of males and females in each department, break them down and draw out the timelines that are costing the most money. No one really needs the actual numbers to understand what an intervention does. That is a preventative type measure. Does that make sense? Because every CEO that I have ever talked to either knows, is married to that timeline, is that timeline, or has a sister or a mother that is that timeline. And that cause and effect, that is biology. That is what happens. That is the order of what these things happen in. So you can't argue with it. Then once I have told everyone exactly what's going on in the company, then we look at the benefit, cost, and prescription usages and go, oh, look, I was right. And now this is what this looks like in 10 years, because the biology doesn't lie. So what I want to do is take you through, for some reason it didn't show up there, but I'm going to go and find this. What I would really invite you to do is to trust me on a little visualization. For some reason oh yeah, that's right, here it is. I'm going to take you through some breath work with some music. And what we're going to do is we're going to deliberately breathe and visualize in a way to take whatever heaviness you're feeling, whatever stress or fatigue that you're feeling, we're going to discharge your nervous system of some of it to demonstrate for you how 5 minutes can make all the difference in your day, and to demonstrate the things that I have said today, because I know you're tired. So we're going to be here. So what I want you to do, and this would be a good time to actually turn your video off so you don't feel like anyone's watching you. I would encourage you to close your eyes. And I want you to put your feet on the ground, dig them in. I want you to start imagining that your feet are in your favorite kind of earth, whether it is a forest floor, a warm sandy beach, or even in the snow if you're by a warm campfire, whatever your preferences are. I want you to start breathing in through your nose and out through your nose. I'm going to walk you through what's called the elemental breaths. And they each have certain emotions attached to them. So what I want you to do for right now, because we're going to do a quick rehearsal so that we can go through this and still come back before this is supposed to be over. Breathe in through your nose and out through your nose. This is the earth breath. These are just natural breaths. Then you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And when you do that, relax your jaw and let it all fall out. And then as we go through this music, I'm going to cue you for a fire breath, which is like a dragon, in through the mouth and out through the nose. And then there's going to be an air breath where it's just in through your mouth and out through your mouth like a straw. And we'll imagine the wind in the trees, etc., like that. So I'm going to give you a visualization for it, the emotion and the breath. And then in between, I just want you to let this song resonate with you, because this is what we've all been feeling the last 2 years. And if we hold this in, then we are suppressing our nervous system and making sure that we get sick. If we discharge our nervous system, we're going to feel less tired from trying to hold it in. And then our nervous system has time to spend more time in the parasympathetic side. So we are just, here we go. And I will just say this first part has, there's some Buddhist chanting and stuff like that. I just want you to keep breathing and focus on the imagery, because these are the sounds that actually can help tone our vagus nerve and help the nervous system. That's why we've been using them for thousands of years, okay? So here we go. In through the nose, out through the nose. Dig your feet into the earth. Put your hands on your thighs. Drop your shoulders. Natural breaths, in through the nose, out through the nose. In through the nose, out through the nose. In through the nose. Natural breaths, in through the nose. And now you're going to switch from in through the nose and out through the mouth. This is the water breath. As you breathe out, relax your jaw. Allow yourself to breathe into any tightness in your body, and then release it out of your mouth, relaxing your jaw. Drop your shoulders. Imagine your favorite body of water. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Relax the space between your forehead. Now I want you to stay with this breath, and I just want you to take the song in through the nose, out through the mouth. Cannot count the cost. Relax your shoulders. All that has been broken. All that has been lost. Breathe into the tightness and let it go. Cannot understand the suffering that life brings. War and hate and hunger, and a million other things. Now we're going to switch to the air breath. In through the mouth like a straw, out through the mouth. Imagine a summer breeze. In through the mouth. When I've done all that I can. Let it go. in through the mouth.
And I try to do my part. Let sorrow be the doorway to an open heart.
In through the mouth.
And the light on the hills is full of birds.
Relax your shoulders. Dig your feet into the ground.
The wind in the trees, it comes to save me. The silence, it will never serve me.
We're going to get ready to change our breath in a moment.
I long to hold the whole world in these arms.
Go back to in through the nose and out through the nose. Imagine you're breathing through your heart.
May all be happy.
Gentle breath in through the heart, out through the heart.
May all be safe.
Relax the space between your forehead, relax your jaw.
May all peace everywhere be free.
So when you're ready, start to wiggle your toes, wiggle your fingers. Come back to the room. Open your eyes. So the question is, hands up, who feels like the room they're sitting in feels different than it did before? So you're nodding your head. Yeah. So the question is, this is even more powerful from a neuroscientific level when we're all in the same room, because then we actually help each other even more bring the energy down. But here's what I want to flip for you on this, and then we're going to hand over to Hamza. The room hasn't necessarily changed. Your nervous system's perception of the room that you are in just changed. Thank you.